Hey, good afternoon. I wanted to do a quick video, just to comment on some things. I wanted to make sure this was thoughtful and quick and I don't take too much of your time. Just about rioting and everything you were talking about, um, as far as, Black Lives Matter and, what resources you have when you get to a certain point. And you mentioned originally that uh, once the government or once the police, we're allowed to have life, liberty, and property, and then your most valuable piece of property is your body. And if the police are willing to, take that away, take a person's life, destroy a person's body, and they've been doing it for years and years and decades, what recourse do people have except to riot? Now, maybe looting is off the table, you said, but rioting, you know, is the only way forward. Um, One thing I want to say is that, just to take the premise, um, in America, policing has gotten much better. In just the last decade or so, the number of people killed by cops has gone through the floor. It's gone down, I believe, by 75%. I can double check that fact for you, but it went from like 38 to 9. Um, in just a handful of years. So that's really important to let people know. The first thing is that you know um, police have been working on these, and it's inherently a dangerous job. People, they're on drugs, they're this, they're that. Cop might think someone's on drugs when they're not, think they're not on drugs when they are. It's just very difficult, and you can't hand out force and violence with a spoon. So a cop might need to be violent to stop someone, but you can't, get like 3.5 spoonfuls of violence. A lot of times it's all or nothing. So that's why you get these really bad circumstances, because it's very easy to use too much violence. So that's number one. So things are getting better. All of the stats show that things are getting a lot better. Number two, those riots only make sense if you think racism cannot get worse. If you are under any impression that racism or inequality or the authoritarian nature of our system can get worse, then these riots don't make sense. Because all they're going to do is increase the amount of violence that people use to quell these protests. But people are going to say is, look, they didn't use violence the first day when that Target was burnt down. The cops just let it happen, and people went carte blanche and they just took everything. And people think, just historically, people don't even look back 10, 20, 30 years in history. We've had riots before. We had huge crime rates, and the way the government solved this was mass incarceration and redlining. And that's the problem, that these things worked, that the government essentially said, we're going to arrest anyone who's doing any kind of drugs. We're going to do these tough on crime bills. We're going to expand the prison population immensely. And the rioting stopped. The violence went down from the late 80s through the 90s. So that's one of the dangers, that what is actually going to happen is that FBI is going to start just arresting people left and right. Marijuana, a lot of people turn a blind eye to it because it's legal in certain states, but taking across state lines, having marijuana in your system, they can say you were smoking it in a state you weren't supposed to be in. They can say you were selling it, or you purchased it without a permit. Who knows, right? There's all kinds of things they can do to send people of color to jail. So we don't want a return of these policies, and that's what rioting does. When people see the United States on fire, when they see just innocent people getting beat up, that people don't care about rights. People don't care about what's right, what's wrong. They just want it to stop. So that's the danger of thinking this way. That you're imagining that that the rioters are the only ones who are able to use violence to get what they want, when in reality the government can come back with 10 times the violence and solve things that way. I mentioned a return to redlining. This is almost 100% gonna happen. Redlining, if you don't know, was the process where there were certain neighborhoods where if you were a certain person, if you weren't the right color, if you weren't, didn't have the right pedigree, you just could not get a home or a condo or a business in that area of town. And the banks wouldn't approve a loan for you, and that's where the redlining comes from. Banks would have a red line over the area where they'd not approve, black people to get a house, or people of color, any people of color, or just white trash people. So the reason for that is that, and you already see it happening, people are moving out of New York and California like crazy, specifically since these riots happened. You can look on Zillow or Redfin, specifically since these protests started happening and people started talking about defunding the police. the Zillow housing data is incredible. It's incredible how many people are starting to try and get up and move. And the problem with this, especially in New York, is that a lot of people, there are a lot of rich people, incredibly rich people in New York. And what that means is they have a second house. A lot of people work in finance, in the stock market. They don't have to be in New York. All of that is just data. It's just ones and zeros. And they can do that anywhere. And especially with COVID, a lot of people have been, doing that from remotely anyways, doing that kind of work remotely. And when people start leaving New York and even just, sell one or two of their, downtown luxury condos, New York relies immensely on the taxes of the top few percent in order to make ends meet, in order to provide services, in order to provide drinking water and trains, make sure the subways run on time. We very well within our lifetimes could see New York become the next Detroit. In Detroit, it used to be the number one standard of living in the Western world. Within one generation, it was unable to provide water and basic services, police, fire department to its citizens. So we might see that if the rich people go, New York is going to collapse unbelievably quickly. And you can try and, one thing that rich people will not put up with is an unsafe environment. There was a video going around of someone threatening the Diamond Quarter, the Diamond District, which is a largely Jewish district in New York. And people who live in New York are generally much higher income. They don't have to live there. If someone thinks, well, they're going to come and burn down my district just because I'm Jewish, or just because I have a lot of money, or just because maybe I inherited a place here and this place historically is worth a lot of money. People don't have to live there. And the thing about real estate markets is they very quickly, they're very inelastic, so it's very difficult to destroy real estate, to shrink the supply, or to increase the supply. You can build a house, but realistically, you can't build, you can't increase the amount of houses in any area by 5% in a year. It's very slow. It takes a long time permitting. People's driving patterns. People aren't just going to drive out to the next suburb. Not everyone's willing to make a 2-hour commute. So it's very difficult to increase the housing stock in any area. And so if even just a small number of people leave, you're going to have a huge vacancy, if it's a $10 million condo or a $100 million condo in this case, with New York, there's not a huge amount of demand that's able to step in and fill that, and suck up that supply. So you've got to keep in mind that New York, really does, rely on these high net worth individuals in order to cover the budget. And if you go and you listen to these local aldermen and these local mayors, a lot of them, especially in Minneapolis, are just so scared about what's going to happen. Walmart doesn't have to come back to Minneapolis, neither does CVS. If you live in an area where the CVS and the Target and the Walmart were destroyed, and the public buses aren't coming around, and you don't have a car, right? Because there's tons of lower income people who don't have cars. How are you going to get your prescription? How are you going to get your food? This is a very real problem. And once you essentially get this white flight, is what was called in the past, but it's really just anyone with money. Rich people of color, rich people of any kind don't want to live in an unsafe environment. Then you very quickly get a collapse of the entire city. So, that's really what I wanted to talk about. You ended it with what needs to change in order for us to just, have a better relationship with our cops. Essentially just end the drug war. The vast majority of stops, the vast majority of, people getting arrested is, hey, a cop stops you for speeding, searches your car. If we end the drug war, that's going to really change things. Cops won't be stopping nearly as many people. There won't be nearly as many interactions, even the interactions that occur. Right now, a lot of people feel like, hey, think of how many people Joe Rogan has who smoke weed on his podcast. Now, if that's done in any other state, they could be arrested. Essentially, it's a point of privilege that Joe has for living in California and being a high net worth individual in California. Even when it was illegal, he would talk about smoking, and he's gonna be okay because he's got a lot of money. But that's not true of everyone else. Also, it's not like no cops have ever planted drugs on anyone. So just ending the drug war would do a huge amount. It would like the number of stops would, the number of police searching your car, the number of people getting arrested and sent to jail would, that's almost our entire Fourth Amendment case law is built on the drug war. So once you get rid of the drug war, police will just have a lot less to do, when a lot less to harass people over, and that would be a lot easier to be okay with police, because you just have fewer negative interactions. So long story short, I hope you watch this video just to go over everything again. You mentioned that why rioting might make sense, but I want to just say, hey, it only makes sense if you think things can't get worse. If you think that you're being ignored right now and people are violating your sovereignty and your humanity right now, just wait. Things can get a lot worse, and they're going to get a lot worse. People are going to turn out to vote for mass incarceration 2.0, and it's not going to be fun. So that's point one. Point two, these riots also have the effect of just absolutely destroying these cities. We're already seeing it happen. Real estate prices in these places are going through the floor. I don't know how cities are going to recover. Local municipalities, goodbye to local school systems, goodbye to the services. Within our lifetimes, we might see Chicago or New York go the way of Detroit. And it's sad to see these world-class cities fall. So that's number two. Number three, we might see a return of redlining. I didn't go into that as much, but basically newer places, younger cities, younger communities tend to be far more segregated than older ones. So as people flee these older communities and go to newer ones, they're much more likely to self-segregate. And that's not good for racial tensions at all. We might see a return of segregation, as we are seeing in universities already. So that's number three. Last point, you asked what we need to do for cops to change the attitude. The whole act, almost 100% of cops harassing citizenry happens over speeding tickets and Fourth Amendment. So people, searching your car, searching your person for drugs. Speeding tickets, I guess you have to have them. Maybe you can change this or that, but the idea that a cop is gonna, check your car and, think of how many people smoke weed in a state where it's illegal. It's unbelievable how many people smoke weed. So every time these people are in constant fear of getting their life ruined if a cop catches them. So if we just legalize drugs, that would decrease the number of interactions cops have to make by literally like a half. The number of car searches that would occur would probably drop 90%. The number of stop and frisks, stuff like that, would decrease a huge amount. So those are the 4 points of this video. If you had time to watch, thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye. Oh, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. A couple people subscribed. I really appreciate it. Yep, just here to help. Let me know what you think, and if you have any questions or want a video on anything else. Bye.